Well, good afternoon, folks. This is Bill Costanzo, Livestock Guardian Dog Research Specialist at the AgriLife Center in San Angelo. Thank you for logging on today. Today is our August Q&A session, which features questions posted by producers during the last month here. So I do want to thank the Sheep and Goat Predator Management Board for providing funding for this program. And also Dr. Redden, our center director here, for providing leadership for the program. So our first question today is, what's the best way to keep an 8-month-old puppy from chasing chickens? And apparently he's not running after the chickens, he just kind of trots along with them. The producer says that they put a dangle stick on him, but that he's figured out how to do some type of hopping and galloping thing and completely disregards it. So my first recommendation, I guess, that he doesn't stop when you've told him no before. And since he's figured out the dangle stick and kind of how to get around that, I guess my only other recommendation would be to move to a shock collar. Since he is a pup, he's about 8-month-old, you know, I'd probably have it on one of the lower settings to start out with. And then as, you know, you try to correct him, if he doesn't change that behavior, then I would increase the setting on it. You just have to be careful how high and how often that you're using, you know, the shock collar, because you don't want him to get scared of guarding the chickens every time he runs up to them. As long as he's not chasing them or, you know, trying to catch them, you know, that would probably be okay. And so the producer just mentioned in the chat that he does stop if they tell him to. So again, I'd probably still recommend the shock collar. I don't generally recommend shock collars, but you know, on an older pup like this that is getting around, you know, one of the first devices that I like to try with dogs, which is a dangle stick or a yoke or a drag or something like that for some bad behavior that comes up. I think the shock collar is probably warranted for you. I don't have a particular brand or anything like that I'd recommend. You know, I know Tractor Supply has some that you can buy for, you know, not a whole lot of money, and it'll work fairly well for just a close situation like with the Livestock Guardian dog. The next question that we have up today is, what's the best way to keep a 5-month-old pup from eating the goat's feed during feeding of the goats? He isn't aggressive, and the goats don't care, apparently. They just let him eat. But the producer's concerned because livestock feed is expensive, and so is dog feed at this point. Should she just take him out of the pasture during feeding? So first, I'd say I think it's very normal for the dogs to eat livestock feed. You know, they're living with livestock all the time. They see livestock eating feed that we put out for them, and so they just kind of naturally, you know, go towards that feed as well. You know, our puppies will even eat cottonseed hulls, which I'm really surprised, but they seem to eat it when we feed it to the animals in the bonding pens. So if you're really that concerned about it, you know, I'd probably move the pup out of that area and try to coordinate his feeding at the same time. I'm assuming that you're hand feeding the pup, and so, you know, I would try to feed him away from the livestock during that time, but not out of eyesight, you know, just someplace else in the pasture, you know, put a bowl down for him and feed him there. You know, hopefully that way he stays with the livestock, but, you know, he's eating his own food instead. Don't take him completely away or completely out of the pasture, you know, when you're feeding, because that just kind of teaches your dogs that it's okay to leave livestock at some point to go do whatever they feel like they need to do. So keep it in the same pasture, but just a little distance away is what I would recommend for you. And if anybody has any other questions, you know, as we're going through these today, feel free to put them in the comments, and I should be able to see them, and I can answer those after we get done with the questions that were previously posted. So the next question I had up, and this is going to be kind of a long answer, but it's how does somebody go about training a livestock guardian dog puppy? So I guess first I would say start by selecting a weaned pup from a good reputable breeder, somebody that raises, their dogs with the same type of livestock that you have. It does seem like, dogs that are born and raised with sheep or born and raised with goats have a tendency as adults to want to go back to that species. So if you have goats, buy a livestock guardian dog from somebody that has goats on the property, or sheep, or whatever animal it is that you're wanting to bond them to. It just helps with the success rate. After you get your pup home, we place 8-week-old pups right out into bonding pens with 4 to 6 head of livestock, and we rotate those livestock every 2 to 3 weeks. And we have a mix of livestock in our bonding pens. If you've seen any of our Facebook postings, that's mainly because I don't know where our dogs are going to end up going to, whether we're going to keep them on one of our ranches or they're going to go to a cooperating producer's ranch, and what type of livestock they may encounter. So you don't necessarily have to put different, species of livestock in there if all you're going to ever have is sheep. But I would, encourage you that if you're a young producer, for instance, and you're starting out and you have some goats and you think that you might add sheep, it doesn't hurt to bond your dog to multiple species of livestock. It just makes it easier later on for them to guard more species, and there's no issues with them staying with one versus the other when the dog is an adult. We keep the dogs in bonding pens until they're 6 months of age, and that's something else that I would recommend. At that point, we let them out into a small trap or a small pasture that we have here, and they stay with livestock, some more livestock and some more guardian dog puppies until they're 8 to 10 months of age, kind of depending on their maturity and not just maturity structurally, but also mental maturity. Also make sure that you socialize your pups. It's really important that you socialize your livestock guardian dogs. You should be able to go out into your pasture and catch any livestock guardian dog that you have, whether you're a small producer or you're a large producer. It's really to your benefit to have the dog socialized. If they get into a porcupine or get gored by a pig or cut by wire or something, you should be able to easily catch them and get them taken care of, or even just, annual vaccinations. We also, I'd recommend, as far as training a pup, make sure that you leash train them, tether train them, put them in a truck, drive them around, once a week for 5 or 10 minutes. And some people even like to crate train them in case they have to spend an overnight, at the vet. They're going to be stuck in one of those little small pens. It just helps keep the dogs calm later on in life. It's important that you observe your puppy on a regular basis when they're in the bonding pen, and then also when they're released into some smaller pastures, all through adolescence. So from, say, 8 months all the way to 18 months. A lot of times you can kind of just, shut the truck off, get out, walk up to the pens, just kind of, quietly and observe them and see what's going on. A lot of times, they won't be doing anything wrong, but other times, they might be chewing on tails or ears, or chasing some stock around, or biting back legs, doing a bunch of other kind of stuff that adolescent dogs do. And so if you can, observe them from time to time, it'll help you curb some of those bad habits that a lot of them tend to have. Let's see. I guess the last thing as far as training goes, looking at my notes here, never promote any behavior that you don't want them to repeat. I guess that's one of the biggest things that I tell producers. If your dog shows up on the back porch or shows up at your headquarters, you've got to stop everything that you're doing right then and there and take them back to where they're supposed to be with whatever livestock it is. I know everybody gets busy. You got a bunch of things going on. You're trying to get to work. You've got water out or a broken pipe or something you're trying to get fixed. And the tendency is to just, put the dog in a kennel, throw some feed down for it. You'll take them back when you get a chance, or tie them up and you'll take them back when you get a chance and you give them some feed. They're going to come back to that location again because you were nice to them. You fed them, you put them in some shade, you gave them some water, and so they're going to return to that location again. So make sure that you take them back, if they get out, immediately. Scold them, throw them in the truck, take them right back to the sheep or goats that they're supposed to be with. if you have any other questions about training or anything, we do have a lot of fact sheets on our website. And if that didn't answer all your questions for the producer that asked that, feel free to contact me here at the AgriLife Center. The next question that we had up, producer has a young Pyrenees female, about 2 years old. They've had her for a couple months. This morning, they saw her chasing some sheep, and they hollered at her, and the dog finally stopped, but they were afraid that she was going to just keep chasing the sheep around, and eventually, maybe some of them might die from exhaustion. What they wanted to know is if they can break the dog from running the sheep, and this is the third time they caught her chasing the sheep, and now the sheep, I guess, are afraid of the dog. So I guess most likely what's happened, since you have an older dog, the dog wasn't disciplined correctly during the adolescence phase, and so this behavior, she seems to think is okay to do now. And so normally for a younger dog, like I talked about the producer earlier, I'd suggest a dangle stick, but since she's this old and she's already probably used to this type of behavior of chasing livestock around, I don't know if that would really work for you. I would suggest putting one on her anyway, and make sure it's a good size piece of wood, like a 2x4, maybe about 18 inches long. But I would also get a shock collar on her again, and that way, anytime you catch her, you can stimulate her. You can tell her no, and it should be just one no, and then shock her. I think that would be your best bet. The dangle stick will help work when you're not around and you can't see her. But again, have her in a large pen or a small trap where you can observe her regularly. And every time you sneak up on her and she's chasing stock, hit her with that shock collar. And since she's that old, I'd probably start on the highest level with that dog. She needs to stop that kind of behavior immediately. Next question that we had up is, how often do you trim nails, and how do you teach your dog to tolerate the nail clipping? Well, we kind of, normally trim the dog's nails, once or twice a year out in the field. It's kind of when we're, bringing in livestock, we check the dogs over. If they've got long nails, we get them trimmed up, or if we're vaccinating the dogs at that point, I do a whole bunch of different healthcare things on the dogs. But, the main thing is to start when they're a puppy. It's really difficult, to get an older dog who hasn't had their feet handled enough. I don't want to say that they're going to enjoy having their nails trimmed, but not fight you as much. So, what I do as part of my socialization with the puppies and the bonding project, I spend about 5 minutes 3 times a week with direct socialization. And so that's petting the dog, checking their ears, checking their eyes. I stick my finger in their mouth. I check their teeth. I gently roll them over, rub my hands all over them, and I especially try to pay a lot of attention to their feet. I'll pick up every single paw. I rub my fingers through their toes, and especially like their back toes. And I also start just trimming those little sharp puppy toenails at that point also. And eventually they get used to it, and they don't mind you picking up their feet and clipping their nails. Some of them don't like it still a whole lot, but they tolerate it, and they'll stand there for you to do that when they get to be adults. So that's what I would recommend. The other thing is it's really important to get a good quality pair of trimmers. A lot of these cheap ones that you find, I actually had one break one time when I tried to clip the nails of my own livestock guardian dog. He's a really big dog, about 125 to 135 pounds, kind of depending on the time of the year. And his nails are just huge. I actually broke one of them just trying to clip his nails. And so a good quality trimmer, should have steel all the way down through the handles, and that way it remains nice and sharp, and it doesn't crush the nails. That's another problem with some of the cheap trimmers, is they don't stay sharp after the first or second time that you use them, and so it's crushing the nail instead of cutting the nail, and so that hurts the dog because it's crushing that nerve ending that's inside there by the quick. And so again, just, make sure you get a good quality trimmer, keep it sharp. And the other thing I do is just, give your dog some treats. When you show up out there and you see them, give them some pepperonis or canned wet food or something like that. I always try to do that, when I get done vaccinating the dogs or working with them or anything like that. Give them some treats, and that way they're a little more apt to enjoy the time that they have with you. Next question that we had up is they'd like to do some rotational grazing with the goats using an electric fence. They wanted to know if it'll keep their livestock guardian dog in and how to train them to it. They have 2 guard dogs, one that's 5 years old and another that's 5 months old. So I guess I would say, as far as keeping the dogs in, it's probably going to depend on how many hot wires or strands of wire that you're running. One strand is definitely not going to keep them in. Even if a dog doesn't roam, they're going to find a way to easily get underneath that one strand, because if it's low enough, to keep them in, then they could hop over it, or if it's too high, they'll crawl under. So I'd say you're probably going to need at least 3 strands of hot wire, or you might even want to look at some of that electric netting that they have out now. As far as training the dog goes, again, one part of the project that we have going on here at the center is testing dogs and bonding them in pens with hot wire and without. And so, I know it's a little late for you on this round of dogs, but if you're going to be using this electric fencing, I would start, the next time you get a dog, start them in a pen with some hot wire. As far as the dogs that you have now, I would put them in a large pen or small trap, that's got some hot wire in it, and leave them in there for several weeks with that hot wire on. Make sure you've got 2 or 3 ground rods spaced out well so that fence is good and hot. Again, don't buy a cheap fencer because it's not going to light them up enough to keep, to teach them some respect and stay away from that fence. So, keep in that pen for a while, and then try putting them out with the rotational fencing and see how that goes. Our next question is, how do you introduce a livestock guardian dog that's going to primarily be outdoors guarding livestock to an indoor pet that they have? The pet dog is about 8 years old, and the question was, another part of the question was, do you recommend training on the ranch or from a professional? Well, I don't think you ever need to really spend money on a professional trainer. It's pretty expensive, and normally, you either have to take the dog to them or you've got to leave the dog with them. It can get pretty costly. I guess, that you have a puppy. It didn't say in the original question. So it's a lot easier to acclimate a puppy, to any other livestock or other dogs, cats, any pets that you have. So if you have a puppy, while that puppy's in the bonding pen, I would bring those other animals out, that pet dog that you have, and get them accustomed to each other. It's as simple, if you have a puppy, it's just the pet dog, have them on a leash. The puppy will definitely come up to that older dog when you bring them into the bonding pen. They can smell each other, and your livestock guardian dog will understand that, since that dog is with you, it's okay, and it's not going to be a threat to its livestock. Anytime that the puppy is separated at some point for a long period of time. So say you put the dog out, it's mature now, and then you're going to bring the pet dog out for some reason. I would say you need to give them a little bit of time to acclimate to each other again. At that point, I'd probably have both dogs on a leash, or one of them tethered and the other on a leash, and let them smell each other and sniff each other so they understand that everything's okay. If your livestock guardian dog is older, and so it's getting more into that adult phase, say it's a year or year and a half or even older than that, the process is a little bit longer. I would suggest, tethering the livestock guardian dog in a pen, bring your pet dog in on a leash, and keep them at a little bit of a distance. Again, take everything slow. This process can't be rushed. And, over time, bring the dogs together, every day for a couple weeks. If you don't see any aggression from either dog, then take probably the pet dog off the leash and let them walk around in a pen with the livestock guardian dog tethered. Again, if they're, do this over a couple weeks, if there's no issues, then bring some livestock into the situation. You know, leave your guardian dog tethered, let the livestock walk around, let the pet dog on a leash with the livestock. You know, then let your guardian dog off the tether, let your pet dog off the leash. And as long as everybody's getting along okay, again, repeat that process every couple days or every day if you can, for a few weeks until you're sure that there's no type of aggression, that the guardian dog isn't going to see your pet dog as a threat. And it doesn't mean, you know, if you acclimate your guardian dog to either your herding dogs that you have or your pet dogs, that they won't still guard your livestock against a foreign dog or any other type of canine predator that's going to come up. You know, they seem to know that the dogs that they see on a regular basis with you are okay to be out there. I think that's it for our questions that were pre-posted. It looks like I've got a couple here in the comments, so I'll try to get to those real quick. Brandon has, he's got several older dogs, 1 to 3 years old, that he cannot catch without getting them in a corral when he catches the sheep, and sometimes not even then. I definitely understand what your issue is, Brandon. Aside from doing better when they were younger, any tips on how you can break them to being caught and handled? Well, I guess the biggest thing is I would say is it's a long process. You can re-socialize dogs. You know, if you can catch any of them and you have a kennel that's escape proof that you can put them in from time to time, you know, just going in there on a daily basis, putting some feed down and spending some time trying to let them, you know, let you come up to them and pet them, eventually start brushing them. You know, if they're longer haired guard dogs, get rid of some of those mats and burrs and stuff like that that get accumulated in their hair coats. Just that general handling will really help. It took us, honestly, about a year to re-socialize an older dog. We just had to put Max down about a month and a half ago or so from an illness that he got related to ehrlichiosis. But our ranch foreman worked with Max for about a year and a half. That dog you could not catch, you know, but by the end he was able to go out, catch Max in the field, and it really just takes a lot of time. You've got some younger dogs, and so I would say, you know, now is probably the time to definitely get started trying to do that. Take some canned wet food out or some sort of treats or whatever. Every time you see them, you know, toss them out to them and try to get them to come closer to you each time that you go out and do that. Again, don't rush anything. Don't, you know, once they start getting close to you, don't try to catch them and you know, do some socialization. Just let them keep coming closer and closer to you until they'll just take the food out of your hand and stand there and eat it. Once they're at that point, then you can start petting them and, you know, going through the process of re-socializing those dogs. Like I said, it's a lot of work, but it can definitely be done because we were able to do it with a dog out at the ranch in Ozona. Another question that's on the comments here today. Okay, regarding one of my previous questions about feeding the dogs, you know, in the pasture because you don't want them to leave the livestock. The producer has 5 acres with the back 3 fenced separately that the goats stay in, and most of the chickens stay back there. They don't want to let them out in the front in the morning and evening to play with our pet dogs and kids to get some energy out of them. Says he doesn't leave the gate if we don't tell him he can. Is it all right, or should we leave him completely in the back? I guess I'd try to say, you know, obviously you have a small place, and your dog is almost more of a property guardian than a livestock guardian. So I guess it really depends on what you're wanting from your dog. You know, if you're wanting him to be strictly a livestock guardian dog, then I would leave him with livestock all the time. It's fine for him to be socialized with your pet dogs and for your kids, but I would say try to leave him with your livestock as much as possible. Otherwise, he'll end up at the back porch, and if he'll end up just kind of guarding the house instead of guarding your livestock at some point. So I don't think he's probably ruined or anything like that, but I would try to leave him in the back as much as possible, and go to him instead of bringing him out away from the livestock. Again, it's that promoting behavior that you don't want. Go to him, pet him, take him on leash walks around the pasture that he's in, tether him back there with livestock, do all that kind of stuff with the livestock instead of away from your livestock. It'll keep him bonded to your livestock and doing the job that you need him to do, which is guard the livestock. The next question that came up is, when younger dogs fight enough to be separated, can they ever go back together to guard? I guess, boy, that's a tough question. I know from talking to some breeders that we work with, one in particular, it's one of his breeding males. He cannot put any other dogs in that pasture with that male. He is just super aggressive. The dog never roams or anything like that, stays with the livestock all the time, throws some great pups. We've used some of those dogs, but that dog will not tolerate any other dogs in there. He's even killed some of his other dogs that he's put in the pasture with him. So, if they're a younger dog and they were fighting, if they haven't been spayed or neutered, I highly encourage you to get that done. It does help, keep them from roaming. It stops some of those aggression issues that are going on. And I guess my other question is, what were they fighting over? Are they just fighting over territory? Are they fighting over feed? What was the reason, that those dogs were fighting and being aggressive to each other? Some of those things, food aggression does come up from time to time, because either you have an intact animal or, you may not have enough feeding stations, for instance, if you're a larger producer in a pasture. So you might have to add an extra feeding station if it's a resource guarding issue that's causing them to fight. But, again, if you separate them too long, then you kind of need to go through a process of, getting those two dogs accustomed with each other, especially if they were fighting. A lot of times, you can put new guard dogs out with old dogs and there's not an issue. If it's a younger and an older dog. When they're the same age, there seems to be issues a lot of times with them fighting for, who's going to be the dominant dog in the pasture. And so that you don't end up losing a guard dog, from a fight because one of them kills the other, I would slowly introduce them kind of in the same process I mentioned earlier. Put them in a pen together, have one tethered, one on a leash, bring them in, bring some livestock in and kind of go through that process for several weeks until there's no aggression that's being seen. We just had one more question come up. Is there any way or suggestion for a puppy livestock guarding dog 3 months old to stop eating the eggs? Well, I guess it'd probably be easier, to have your hens lay in a coop of some sort, or a portable trailer or something like that, where the eggs are high enough where the dog can't get to them. I don't think you're probably going to curb him or her from eating those eggs. Even if you're feeding them well, they're probably going to find those and end up eating them. So that would probably be my suggestion. I don't have a lot of experience with dogs and poultry, but I think it'd be easier to raise the nesting boxes up higher, and put some type of a little ramp for the chickens to walk up that the dog can't get up and get to the eggs instead. So I'm not sure. I think we got to all the questions that were posted. If I didn't fully answer any of your questions, folks, feel free to just, shoot me an email here at the AgriLife Center. My email is bill.costanzo, it's COSTANZO, at ag.tamu.edu, and I'd be happy to answer your questions, or feel free to call me here at the AgriLife Center. My direct number is 325-657-7311. So I think with that, I don't see any other questions posted here today. So thank you everyone for watching. Again, I do want to thank the Sheep and Goat Predator Management Board for funding the position here. And if you have any other questions, post them onto our Facebook page. We also have the blog that I write that's on our website. We've got some other good stuff on our website now. There's a bunch of research articles that we've had uploaded to the web page, the fact sheets, case studies, and some other things like that. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month, probably on that first Thursday of September at 3 o'clock.